District Attorney Fani Willis's office, and legal experts think that this signals that more are on the way. The latest domino to fall, Kenneth Chesebro, who's been called the architect of the fake elector scheme, pleading guilty yesterday on the eve of trial to one felony count of conspiracy to commit filing false documents. As a part of his plea deal, Chesebro has agreed to provide evidence and testimony that could implicate other co-defendants, including former President Donald Trump. Chesebro also must turn over documents to the DA's office to be in compliance with his probation. And as the lawyer for Trump and the Trump campaign, Chesebro's documents include attorney-client communications that Donald Trump might not want jurors to see. Joining us now is Scott Grubman, attorney for Kenneth Chesebro. Scott, man, I got to tell you, I watched you, Manny Aurora, fighting the good fight for your client for a while. At the 11th hour, though, literally, you guys take a plea deal, or your client does. Why? Why the 11th hour plea for Kenneth Chesebro?
Well, first of all, Katie, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And look, that is often what happens in criminal cases like this, whether it's this case or just a run-of-the-mill case, which is, you file pretrial motions, you make the best arguments you can, you try to get the charges whittled down as much as you can, you try to put as much pressure on the district attorney, the prosecutor, and then, sometimes towards the end, when you're about to strike a jury, the reality sinks in, which is, my future is going to be decided by 12 strangers. And sometimes that's a really sobering thought for a criminal defendant. And so I think oftentimes what happens is the closer you get to trial, the more a defendant thinks about plea deals. And this plea deal, Katie, in my opinion, was really just too good to say no to, because there's no jail time. And I think just as importantly, the RICO charge was dropped. And so I think it's important to note, Mr. Chesebro did not plead guilty to RICO. Mr. Chesebro pled guilty to conspiracy to commit the filing of false documents. And so while Mr. Chesebro was ready for trial, we were ready for trial, this was the best outcome. He is now home with his family, and he could put this behind him.
Yeah, but Scott, I got to push back for a second, though. Your client pled to a felony. He's the first one to have to plead to a felony thus far. And it's not just he pled to conspiracy to commit the filing of a false document. Let's dig a little bit deeper. I mean, he pled guilty, didn't plead no contest. He said, I am guilty of count 15 in the indictment, which implicates Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, in a conspiracy to file a fake elector certificate, knowing that that was not true. So, I mean, your client may have gotten a probationary deal, but at this stage, he's admitted that the big lie was a lie and that everything that he was doing wasn't right.
So I'd like to push back respectfully a little bit on you, Katie. First of all, Mr. Chesebro never believed in the big lie. If you ask Mr. Chesebro today who won the 2020 presidential election, he would say Joe Biden. And you referred to him, I know you were quoting the district attorney's office and others, but you referred to him in the opening as the architect of the fake elector scheme. But I want to be clear about something. While yes, this is a felony he pled guilty to, it was the RICO that accused him of being the architect of the fake elector scheme. And I want to ask you and all your listeners, Katie, for one moment to think about this question. If Mr. Chesebro was the architect of the fake elector scheme, if Mr. Chesebro was the architect of some plan to bring down democracy, which is what I've heard over and over for the last couple of months, both in court and out of court, would the district attorney of Fulton County have offered him probation and first offender status? I think the answer is no, and I think if you asked her, the answer would be no. And so while Mr. Chesebro did take responsibility for conspiracy to commit filing of false documents, I want to make something clear. He did not implicate anyone else. He implicated himself in that particular charge. And while he is required to go testify truthfully if he's called by the state, and Mr. Chesebro is a man of his word, and he will go testify truthfully if called by the state's going to have to decide at some point whether they think Mr. Chesebro's testimony will help them. And if they believe it will help them, well, they'll call him and he'll come testify. But also at the same time, Katie, I will say, if he's called by a defendant, he will come testify and testify truthfully.
Scott, now, listen, you and I have been doing this for a long time, right? Although I technically don't do it anymore. I do this. But your client gave a recorded proffer to the state of Georgia. And what did he say?
I'm not at liberty to say exactly what he said, but here's what I'm at liberty to say. Someone asked me earlier, if you were Donald Trump, would you be worried? And I could personally, honestly answer no. And it's not that Mr. Chesbrough is trying to protect Donald Trump or anyone else. He's not. He's ready to move on with his life. But I was there in the proffer. Again, I'm not going to say what was said because it is a confidential proffer and that will probably get me in trouble. But I can say that I personally do not believe the state will call him to testify on their behalf. If they do, and if I'm wrong, Mr. Chesbrough will be there. He'll testify truthfully. If I were the state,
Scott,
I would not call.
Scott, very quickly before I have to let you go, another thing that you said about being the architect of the fake elector scheme, et cetera, your client didn't just do legal memos. Your client was at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. He was accompanying Alex Jones and others. So it's more than just writing legal memos. It's doing it at the behest of someone else. And so maybe he thinks that he doesn't implicate Donald Trump. But you and I both know he wouldn't give a proffer that didn't have value to the state. The state wouldn't give that plea offer to your client unless there was something that was going to be able to help them with the other defendants.
I think the state gave a plea offer to our client because they really weren't ready. And I think that's why we filed the speedy trial demand. And that's why a lot of defendants do. But let me just say this. I disagree. He was not, I think you said, with Alex Jones. He was in D.C. on January 6th on business. He did see Alex Jones. He took a picture. I can absolutely promise you, he never met Alex Jones. He took a picture because he recognized him from TV. And let me say this, I have personally seen text messages, and so has the district attorney now, where on January 6th, when Mr. Chesbrough found out about the horrible violence at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., he said how much he detested it. And he specifically said, and it's not now that he's sorry for what he did, this is on the day that it happened. He said, I wish there would have never been a rally. I really wish that these folks wouldn't have been violent because it really took away from what we, Ken Chesbrough and others, were trying to do from a legal standpoint. And so Mr. Chesbrough detests the violence that happened at the Capitol. He was not part of it. He was not in the Capitol. And I want to make that clear.